Alright, I'm back with another ranking video. This time we're going to be talking about another one of my favorite bands, Between the Buried and Me, or for short, BTBAM. Now, Between the Buried and Me is a really important band to me. They're the band that got me into harsh vocals, into really heavier music, which kind of led me down the path towards some of the other stuff that I do. So I have a real fondness for Between the Buried and Me and all of their music. So I'm going to rank all of their studio albums. I'm also going to include the Parallax Hypersleep Dialogues EP on here as well. You can disagree with me if you want on whether that's a full-length album. I know it's listed as an EP, but it's long enough for me to, I think, include it here as well. I'm also going to rank the Automata albums separately here, 1 and 2. They are going to be right next to each other just based on my particular rankings, but I'm going to rank them separately because I think they are listed as separate albums here, although they're kind of one thing as well. So, with all that out of the way, let's get into it. There are 11 albums to rank here, and in 11th place, I have the self-titled album Between the Buried and Me. Now, this is a good album. I think Between the Buried and Me has a really strong discography overall. So none of these albums I would consider to be bad. This one, for me, it lacks a lot of those progressive elements that they kind of bring in later. There is still a lot of variety here. There's some nice cleaner moments and stuff like that, but this leans much more towards the hardcore, metalcore side of things. And of course, on this album, there's only 2 members that are still in the band, so Tommy and Paul. But you can kind of hear like some of the things they're going to start to do later on. But for me, it just leans a little bit too much towards that kind of really heavy, aggressive thing without the variety involved in it as well. I really like the heavy stuff, but I like to kind of have the contrast of the proggy, more mellow stuff as well, and the kind of different influences that they bring later on. But there are some good songs on here. I really like Aspirations and Arsonist. I really like the last song as well. They do a longer track here. You know, it's almost 10 minutes long. So you can kind of see where they're headed with this album, but it's just not quite there yet, and there's some kind of growing pains from it being the first album. And of course, the production isn't quite there as well, although they did remix and master this in 2020, which is pretty good. So in 11th place, I've got Between the Buried and Me, the self-titled album. Moving on to the next album, in 10th place, I've got The Silent Circus. This is another great album, and it kind of really continues upon what they did in the debut, but kind of makes it a lot better, bringing some more influences in and all that. It's not quite there where they end up with their sound later on, and it's still missing some of those progressive elements for me, but there are some good songs on here. I really like Mordecai. That's the one that really sticks out to me. It's got that beautiful clean section, and that's something that BTBAM is so good at doing, kind of contrasting the clean and heavy moments. But this isn't one that I go back to a lot either, just like the debut. But it's a good album, and it's kind of them continuing their sound forward. So in 10th place, I've got The Silent Circus. In 9th place and 8th place, I've got Automata 1 and 2. And these are probably pretty low compared to a lot of people's lists, but these albums just never really caught me the way that some of the other Between the Buried and Me albums did. Of course, these are later albums, so it kind of has that modern Between the Buried and Me sound. There's a lot of really interesting stuff happening here, and I love the variety and all that. There's just something about these that never really captured me quite the same way as other albums. It could have just been where I was in my life at that point. But these are good albums, and I will say I went back and re-listened to these recently within the last month or two, kind of prepping for this list, and they really kind of aged well for me. I think they kind of went a lot higher than I would have expected. Not enough to like pass some of the other albums, but I'd probably rank these both like 9 out of 10. I'm going to put number 2 ahead of number 1 because I think the songs are just a little better for me personally. I really like The Proverbial Bellow and Voice of Trespass. Of course, on the first album, you have Blot. That's a killer song. And I really like Condemned to the Gallows, too, the first track. So a lot of good stuff on here, a lot of experimental stuff. There's some really fun moments, too. It just doesn't quite grab me as much as some of the later Between the Buried and Me albums. But their discography is so strong that albums this good ending up this low is a good sign for the future albums. So in 9th place, I've got Automata 1, and in 8th place, I have Automata 2. In 7th place, we're going to my home state of Alaska, the album Alaska from 2005. This is the first album that features the current lineup, so you have Blake Richardson on the drums, and Dusty Waring on guitar, and Dan Briggs on bass, joining Tommy and Paul. This is the lineup of BTBAM that is still together, although I don't know what's going on with Dusty. Maybe someone knows in the comments. But at least on the albums, this is the current lineup they have. And this is really them pushing towards what they're going to end up doing with Colors and later on. So it still is heavy. It's kind of leaning, a lot towards that earlier sound as well, but they're bringing even more different influences in. And I think Selkies is probably the song that really hints at where they're going with their sound. So that is one of my favorite Between the Buried and Me songs is still one of their classic songs. It's just like a perfect progressive metal song, and that ending solo is amazing. I actually have a cover of it on my channel if you want to see me playing through that. It's just an absolutely beautiful solo, and that song really does a great job of contrasting the heaviness with those lighter moments, which is what Between the Buried and Me does so well, and what I really fell in love with when I first listened to them was that contrast of like the craziness and the insanity and the heaviness combined with those really beautiful moments. And that song is kind of the perfect example of that. But there's other good songs on here as well. There's Alaska. It's got that kind of classic sweeping intro, which a lot of people learned back in the day. A lot of other great songs on here as well, like Backwards Marathon. That's a great one. A really strong album overall. There's a few songs in the middle where I'm kind of like, meh, on them. And it's not one I go back to a ton, but it definitely is kind of them pushing towards that modern sound. And I really do enjoy this album. So in 7th place, I have Alaska. In 6th place, we've got the Parallax Hypersleep Dialogues EP. Now, by some band standards, this would be a full-length album. You know, a lot of tech death albums are only 30 minutes long, but it's only 3 songs. So that's the reason it's not going to rank any higher than 6th here. But this is one that I really enjoy. It's one that came out kind of right after I'd gotten into Between the Buried and Me. So it hit me at a good time. These 3 tracks are all awesome. A lot of cool stuff going on here. I just wish it was a little bit longer because they don't really have the time to kind of delve into all the different elements of the music in such a short space. But really good tracks. I especially love Lunar Wilderness. That's a great closer. So a great album, just can't go any higher because of how short it is. So in 6th place, I've got the Parallax Hypersleep Dialogues EP. Now we're getting to the really good stuff. In 5th place, I have Coma Ecliptic from 2015, and this is an album that really grew on me, probably more than any other Between the Buried and Me album. If you'd asked me 5 years ago where this was on my ranking, it'd be pretty low, you know, towards the bottom. But over the years, this one has grown on me, and I kind of know what they were going for now. This is like their rock opera album. It's their softest album. It has kind of the most old school progressive rock influences on it. It's the one that I would show people if they're not really into metal, because there's a lot of singing on this album, not nearly as much harsh vocals. And there's a lot of sounds they experiment with on this album that they then bring into some of the later albums, which is really cool. It was a nice departure after Parallax, which was this big metal, you know, prog metal album, to do something a little bit different with this Coma Ecliptic. Good songs on here. I really love the Coma Machine. That's one I use as a mix reference all the time. This album sounds absolutely incredible. It might be their best sounding album from a production standpoint. But King Redeem, that's a great song. I really like Memory Place. There's all sorts of good tracks on here, and it flows really nicely. I just miss some of the heavier elements. You know, if there was some more of that on here, this one might even get ranked higher. But in 5th place, I have Coma Ecliptic. All right, now it's time for the top 4, and this is really tough. All 4 of these albums are 10 out of 10 to me, perfect Between the Buried and Me albums, and it's really hard to rank them. So just know that I toiled with this decision quite a bit before I decided. But in 4th place, I'm going to put The Great Misdirect from 2009. This is a really, really good album. It's a perfect album, and it's hard to put it this low, but I really do enjoy everything about this album. It's like Colors, but a little bit more progressive and a little bit more varied. But it still has that kind of aggressive, heavy edge that they had from earlier. And it features maybe the best Between the Buried and Me song, or one of them, Swim to the Moon. That's just an incredible, epic song. It's still their longest song up to this point. Desert of Song, I love that track. It's something I could like play for my mom. You know, it's really soft and beautiful. But then it's contrasted by all these really heavy moments. This album is super varied. I love it. All the playing is incredible. The production's good. Nothing I can say bad about this album at all. And it's really hard to put it at 4th, but I think the top 3 albums are just a little bit better. So in 4th, I've got The Great Misdirect. In 3rd place, we got their newest album, Colors 2 from 2021. I thought there was no way when I heard that this was announced that they were going to be able to capture any of that magic from the original Colors. Such a hard thing to do, but they really did it. And this album stands on its own. You know, it kind of brings back a few things here and there from Colors, which is cool. There's like some nice throwbacks here and there, but this is very much its own album. What I really like is that it brings in some of those newer sounds that they started with Coma Ecliptic, but it combines it with those really heavy elements. It's kind of the perfect blend of Between the Buried and Me to me as far as sound goes. So this is one that I do actually go back and listen to quite often because it's got all of the elements of Between the Buried and Me that I really love. There's a lot of experimentation here still, a lot of those old progressive rock influences and those sort of weird Mr. Bungle stuff happening, but it's still also super heavy in moments. And of course, the production is amazing, being their newest album. Nothing really bad I can say about this album. I can't believe that they actually pulled off a Colors 2 and had it sound so good. Revolution in Limbo, that's one of my favorite favorite tracks. I love that one. I love Human as Hell, just the ending of that. It kind of calls back to White Walls in a really cool way, but it's its own track as well. Absolutely love Colors 2. This is an incredible album, and I'm really looking forward to what they do next, considering this is their latest album. So, in third place, Colors 2. Now, these top two albums I went back and forth on for a while. I could not figure out which one I wanted to put in first place. I'm going to go with the obvious answer, but just know that I toiled with this for quite a bit. So at number 2, I've got the Parallax 2 Future Sequence, and this is an album that is grandiose in scope. It's probably Between the Buried and Me's most ambitious album, one of their longest too. Just incredible how they took this whole concept and kind of ran with it in this full-length album. So the Parallax 1 was like super short, and then all of a sudden Parallax 2 is just like this massive concept album. Like Colors 2, this has that perfect balance of the heaviness and then the more experimental side of what they do and the more varied and beautiful melodic moments too. This one is really heavy in moments though, which I absolutely love. Songs like Telos and Lay Your Ghost to Rest. And then there's like the weird parts of Extremophile Elite. And then the last big song at the end, Silent Flight for Parliament. Just so many incredible tracks throughout this album, one that I could listen to over and over again. And in fact, when it came out, I did listen to this over and over again. I was driving a lot for work at the time. So this is one, probably my most listened to Between the Buried and Me album, actually. So it's one that I'm super familiar with and one that kind of really hit me at the perfect time. I've gotten a lot of inspiration from this album in particular. So in second place, I've got the Parallax 2 Future Sequence. And of course, at number 1 is Colors from 2007. There's no way this wasn't going to be the top album. I had thought about putting Parallax 2 there, but this is just the quintessential Between the Buried and Me album. And for me, one of the most important albums to my growth as a prog musician. This is the album that got me into heavy, harsh vocals, which kind of opened the door to a lot of the things that I do and listen to now. So this album has a really special place in my heart. And I listened to it again like a week ago in preparation for this list. And this holds up incredibly well for me. This is such a good album. I can't believe how good it is actually listening to it again. I was like, wow, this is like, one of those like monumental kind of albums, especially in the progressive metal world. There's a reason it tops a lot of people's lists of, favorite albums, especially in this genre. And it's probably the top of most people's lists, I would imagine, for Between the Buried and Me. And I think for good reason, because there's just so many incredible songs on this album and it just flows so well from beginning to end. It's that perfect combination of the really aggressive, crazy Between the Buried and Me that goes all over the place. And then they insert these beautiful, clean moments here, like the ending of Ants of the Sky. That's one of my favorite. Son of Nothing has beautiful, clean moments. Even White Walls has it too. This is just an iconic album in the world of progressive metal, and it had to top this list. So in first place of my Between the Buried and Me album ranking is Colors. So there are my rankings of the Between the Buried and Me studio albums. You can let me know in the comments what your list would be and let me know where you think I was wrong. I'd be interested to know all of that. Of course, this is all subjective, so your opinions don't matter because this is my ranking. No, I really am interested in what you guys think as far as these albums go. I'm going to be getting back to my normal sort of Prog School lessons here pretty soon, but it's been really fun to do these rankings, so I'm probably going to do a few more of these as well. Let me know if there's some other bands you think I should cover, but I'm curious to know what your rankings are of the Between the Buried and Me albums. Let me know in the comments. I've done a few lessons on Between the Buried and Me in the past. If you want to check out some of those, I'll link them down below. But if you enjoyed this video, subscribe, hit the bell notification, like, comment, share, all of that good stuff. And I'll see you all in the next video. Till then, stay proggy.